Thank you very much for joining us and for staying with us here on TV3 and 3FM. You can also catch us on DSTV 279 and at 3news.com. Now, today we're talking about the GNPC Acre deal. We'll be looking at all the issues, the nuances, and bring to light the key issues in the debate. And this has been going on for quite a while, almost a month. But we can now take a deep dive into it. Now, this deal came about because of a request made by the Ministry of Energy to Parliament for GNPC to acquire stake in the deep water tunnel Cape 3 Points and the South Deep Water Tunnel for some $1.6 billion. And this is from Acre Energy and AGM separately because there are two fields. You talk about the Pecan field, which is the Acre Energy field, and then you can also refer to the Nyankom field, which is the AGM field. And this has led to a fierce debate, lots of controversy about the spirit and the intention behind this deal. So civil society has waded into it and has been very strong in opposition to this. But there have been others who support the deal for a number of reasons, and we'll get into that. So this morning, that's what we'll be dealing with. And so I welcome in studio Ben Boakye, Executive Director of ASEP. Ben, good morning. Great.
To see you.
Thank you. And also via Zoom, we welcome Dr. Yusuf Sulemana, who is also an energy analyst. Thank you, Dr. Sulemana, for joining us. Good morning. All right. Thank you. So let's talk a bit about this deal. I'll start off with Ben. So there's been a lot of criticism about borrowing some $1.6 billion for this deal. And the view is that it's to buy a 37% stake in the Pecan field and a 70% stake in the Nyankom field. First, is this price exaggerated for the two fields?
Thank you very much once again, Jifa, for having me here. And I think, civil society has been frontal with our understanding of the transaction as is. And like you did indicate, we haven't had, enough response from GNPC until recently, where we saw the chief executive mount some media platforms to try and do some damage control, if you like. And from what we are seeing him do, we are seeing a deliberate smear campaign against civil society who have criticized the transaction with specific details. And he's evading that and focusing on some tangential issues that are not so important to the conversation. His claim that, if we acknowledge he's available to engage, it's not accurate. He's never been available. The corporation has never been available. And I'm sure you would have tried.
I have tried,
to
I
get
must admit.
GNPC to the studio.
Yes.
They have never been available to engage. The ones that they tried to engage, we punched into the analysis and we asked for a conversation with the corporation itself when they brought in the Lambert people to engage us. And since then, we are still waiting for that engagement. So the public outlook that GNPC has been available and civil society doesn't want to engage and we just want to criticize the corporation is inaccurate. They have not been available. We issued a statement cataloging issues with the transaction. And ordinarily, you would want to see the corporation respond to us. You know what they did? They rather responded to the Norwegian embassy, to Parliament, and to the IMF because we copied them. All right? So where is the engagement from their end? There hasn't been any engagement. And we also see another diversionary act of Dr. Keke Sapon, trying to rather tout his credentials to win public support for this transaction. Talking about his role in Cocoa Board and how he helped syndicate loans, which has become a practice today. I'm not sure we want to celebrate that as civil society. If he wants to draw our attention to his public life, we are happy to engage in that. But we have deliberately stayed on this conversation to ensure that we are dealing with the specifics and the subject matter. And that smear campaign, we will not engage in. You can invite us into that conversation. I'm not sure civil society want to celebrate turning cocoa board into a debt procurement institution for several decades. Recently, I was in the U.S. to learn about how cocoa is processed, all right, in a museum. And they had cocoa growing in the room to show people how cocoa thrives. That is the legacy you want to leave, and not becoming a debt procurement enterprise. And I'm surprised that he leaves out other roles in public life, like being in TOR. We are happy to get into all of those things, all right? And as much as possible, we want to stay with this conversation. And if he wants to stay there, we would dissect the issues, we will bring to perspective what the problems are with this particular transaction. We can even zoom deeper into his role in this GMPC and pick on many, many, many issues. But as civil society, we believe in the carrot and stick approach, where we encourage the corporation and try to encourage them to do what is right. And that is why we are not always frontal, on some of the ills in the corporation.
Okay, but
and rather want to focus on this.
But let's focus on this in terms of why this deal isn't the best deal at this time. And that's why I asked for the valuation of these blocks based on the offer. Is it exaggerated?
I think that is the conclusion that we have come to. And I tell you what, this is a transaction that has significant history. The blocks, they have a significant history to it. The Hess block, which is the Deepwater Tunnel Cape 3 Point, was managed by Hess from 2006, all right, until 2014 when they decided to offload shares. And even before that, they had made discoveries. They had done 12 wells, 7 discoveries, and 5 appraisal wells. And they decided to offload 50% of that to government and to Look Oil and Fuel Trade. And we refused to buy our 10% that was allotted to us. So Fuel Trade and Look Oil bought their shares. Subsequent to that, they decided to leave and exit and sell the 50% remainder to Aker at a cost of $100 million. So that is how much Aker paid for the stake in that block. And we do agree that subsequent to that, Aker has done some work. They have done 3 wells subsequently to further appraise the well to be sure of what has left them. And, we are now being told that 3 wells, all right, is costing us in excess of $500 million. And we are asking question, how?
What I do know, though, Mr. Boakye, is that to drill 1 well, it costs almost $100 million. So if they've drilled 3, you are talking about $300 million, in addition to all other works that do come up. It is expensive, really, the oil and gas sector. Tullow alone over the last 12 years has spent, what, almost more than $10 billion on Jubilee, more than $8 billion on 10. And that's an average of $1 billion a year.
We can come into those specifics. I mean, every well has its own challenges and its own peculiarities. And the average in Ghana is about $40 million per well, right? The most difficult well that we have seen on the OCTP well, which cost about $100 million, was even eventually, I think, abandoned.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's true.
It's not every well that costs that much. This is just an exploratory well.
Yes.
It hasn't even been appraised, all right? So we can get to those specifics, but we are asking the questions for answers.
So you
the fundamental question even is this.
Just a quick one. So you criticize Aker's projection that they've spent close to $800 million on the work done in that field.
The work done, and the numbers keep shifting. I mean, I'm hearing from Dr. Kekesapon in recent conversation about how they spent the money and what their audit reviews. And they're even telling you that when they bought the blocks, the 2 blocks for about $150 million, their paperworks even cost around $30 million. All right? And those are numbers that we have to interrogate. Those are numbers we have to question. How does registration and paperworks cost that much money? We have to interrogate that. How does Aker's operational cost beyond administrative cost exceed $200 million from the audit that GMPC says it has done. We have to analyze that. For 2 years in Ghana, you can spend over 200 million on administrative costs. We have to interrogate that, because it's not a full-fledged business where you're even producing, you have all the staff in place, you are building your own structures, you are renting. What is costing us 200? We want to interrogate those numbers to be sure that the Ghanaian people are actually paying for something, within the range of what the market would have offered for it.
What would for you be a more realistic figure if, GMPC is to go into this deal knowing fully well that there's something to be gained? What's a realistic figure?
You see, that is why we're saying that the market should determine the price.
When you say the market, you mean there should be a bid? Or?
There should be a bid. And that is what ACE went to the market and got nobody to buy it. The market should determine it. Let the market. And interestingly, GMPC has the right of first right of refusal. So if nobody wants it, or even somebody puts up a bid, GMPC can say, I can match the bid and pick it. So why are you acting as the desperate one to pay for any amount that ACE is asking of you at this point?
Okay, so let me ask essentially about the separate blocks, because most people may be thinking of it as one block, but it's two. There's the Pecan field, which ACE had been working on for quite a while until the depressed oil market environment hit, where we saw oil prices really drop significantly. And then, of course, COVID worsened that. We are seeking to procure 37% of that. And then the Nyankom exploratory field, we're seeking to procure 70%. I'm just wondering, if there's been some significant work done on Pecan, isn't it worth our while to borrow for that development program? But Nyankom is exploratory. We're now going to see if we'll find something. We're not exactly sure if the reserves are verified, are quantified. Would you prefer that, or would civil society prefer that we invested in a field that already has verified, quantifiable resources?
No, I think you're spot on. And that is one of the questions we are raising, that you have two different blocks with different stages, right, of development or exploration. The Nyankom discovery on the AGM block is just one discovery. So the campaign that AGM had, they drilled 2 wells. One was a dry well, and one was a discovery. And now the AGM is saying that 1 well discovery that hasn't been appraised, with initial estimates that they claim to be around 127 million, they want to sell that well to Ghana and values it at $700 million. How do you come by that when you haven't done the necessary work to be able to estimate whether indeed that discovery can move into production? Because in assessing these resources, you are not only interested in how much you can estimate, but based on the geology and the rocks, how much can actually be extracted from the grounds. And that demands much more work for you to be able to come to that assessment. So how does GMPC sit down for somebody to value one discovery at $700 million, to influence the conversation on how much you want to pay for that well, where you can clearly see that ACE has defaulted in its plan of work?
ACE has defaulted on its plan of work, yes, but we all know the circumstances that led to that. We all know those circumstances.
Which is COVID, right?
It's not just COVID. It was the depressed oil market environment, which had been going bad since 2018.
No, but you have a contract with Ghana, right? The contract has prescriptions.
So you want them to borrow to do the development. Is that what offends you? That to the extent that they made a promise, they are not willing to borrow on their balance sheet to get the development done? No,
so we are talking about AGM block now.
Okay, so right? you are talking about the AGM block.
When you make a discovery,
yeah,
all right, you are required within 180 days to do an appraisal, right? So even if you have an excuse, that's 180 is about 6 months. Even if you have an excuse, maybe another 6 months. It's been 2 years. The well hasn't been appraised. There's no agency to appraise it. Okay. So why are we pampering them and then now going to think about valuing at 700 million when they have refused to do the needful. The contract is to be enforced.
Okay.
If the company cannot do the work that they promised to deliver, and if we have time to come back to the history of the block, we get to understand the kind of incentive that we gave to AKE for them to be able to explore and do the necessary work on the block. If they are no longer interested in doing the necessary work, why are we being Father Christmas in this case?
Okay, and that's Ben Boachi there. He's the executive director of ASEP. So let's now turn our attention to Dr. Suleimana. Dr. Suleimana, I understand you support the deal, isn't it? If you can unmute Dr. Suleimana, because I can't hear you, I beg your pardon.
Good to see you. Yeah, so.
Hello, Dr. Suleimana. Okay, looks like we are having some audio challenges with Dr. Suleimana. We'll try and correct that and come back to him. Yes, Dr. Suleimana?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Okay, unfortunately, I can't hear Dr. Suleimana. We'll come back to him and we'll bring his perspectives to you. It's still Key Points here on TV3 and 3FM. Thank you very much for joining us. And let's welcome to our studio as well, Dr. Theo Achampong, economist and political risk strategist. Thank you very much for making some time for us, and you're welcome.
Good morning.
Great. So we've been talking about the GMPC acre deal, and we've been trying to dissect and distinguish between the two fields under discussion. But first, is the figure being put forward to procure these stakes exaggerated?
Yes, good morning once again to you and to your listeners. I think I have had cause to run some of the numbers myself. I've spoken to at least about 20 or so professionals in the industry as well, both in Ghana and outside. And the broad conclusion is that the asset is overvalued or overpriced, and therefore the figure that is being bandied about does not really fit or align to what one should actually pay for if they were to go to the market for the asset. But I guess there are other substantive policy issues that we can discuss. But specifically on the question that you asked, certainly the what is being purported as the transaction value or price, or what they would negotiate on that basis, I don't think that the two assets are worth that price.
What kind of figure would be a reasonable figure?
So I have had or we ran some numbers, and I've been quoted on this. I think we're looking probably at $500 million as the net asset value, possibly based on various assumptions going to this. But one of the key assumptions is actually the oil price. And in some of the numbers that we're privy to, Ben would also be privy to, they're using about $67, $65 a barrel. And we've had cause to actually challenge those numbers because if you look at some of the projections on the long-term trajectory of oil prices, certainly we should be valuing the asset between $55 and $60 a barrel. And $1 a barrel makes a big difference in terms of these valuations. So when you run that and you run other scenarios on the resource estimates, so how much oil can you actually produce from the two discoveries, because they're two separate things, and you make a few further assumptions, then you actually come to a substantially lower figure than what is being purported.
I think one of the things people would like to know is that, is it more about the fact that AGM had put forward a plan of development and they've not implemented the plan of development, and yet are expecting to make this kind of money from the government of Ghana? Is that what is offensive, as opposed to actually getting them to make this investment?
I think it goes both ways, because there are multiple stakeholders and people have different perspectives on it. I've spoken to people, and some of the broad consensus is that AKE and its related sister company want to have their cake and eat it, or eat their cake and have it, however that goes. But to the extent that Ghana went all out, literally, to get them to make these investments in the field only 2 years ago.
Yes.
And then subsequently, pretty much have turned themselves around and saying, okay, we want to sell the asset to you. Selling the asset is not the issue per se. It happens, people do M&A deals in the industry across the board. The substantive issue really is, okay, at what price do you want to buy, for example, the asset? The other substantive issue is, just in May of this year, ACE released various statements because the perception in the market was that they were going to sell out of Ghana. And there was a statement that came from the Ghana office to the effect that they are committed long-term to Ghana, and they are looking forward to resubmitting their revised plan of development by December of this year. This was just a few months ago. Only then, a few weeks or months down the line, for us to hear that they are seeking to divest some of their equity shares in the asset. So you begin to see some inconsistencies in the rhetoric and in the narrative. And secondly, question then also then comes, well, if a company wants to divest, then should we be willing to invest in that? So I mean, should the national oil company be willing to invest in that? Or you wait for them to submit the revised plan of development, let's see the new numbers, let's see the new revenue, the new production projections, let's see the development concept that they intend to use before you can actually make. There are so many uncertainties and unknowns around this particular proposed transaction at this time, which then all fits into inflating the asset value. That really is, you know,
Is really
the substantive
fundamental
issues that
issue.
we need to be discussing, in my view.
All right.
And even if I may add, you see, as we speak, ACE has a vessel on site doing geotechnical and geophysical studies that informs whatever technology they anticipate to use for production. And they are telling us they have a break-even price of $30, even before those studies are concluded. How do they come by those numbers? And GMBC has bought into it. All right? And if ACE is saying that they've brought down the break-even price from $48 from the project finance perspective to $30, that makes the project even much more profitable. Why are they running away from the project?
All right. Let's try Dr. Suleimana now and see if the audio has been fixed. Dr. Suleimana, can you hear me?
Yeah, I think I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, we still have technical challenges because I can really barely hear you. If you can just increase the volume on your Zoom.
Yeah, I think this is maximum. Can you hear me, Jafar?
Okay, I think we'll have to try and fix that from the production bench. Sorry about that, Dr. Suleimana. Let me come back to you, Dr. Theo Champong. From a risk perspective, isn't it really just the case that Ghana is a difficult fiscal and production environment? Because Ghana, before the discovery of Jubilee, used to be called the graveyard of petroleum companies. Jubilee de-risked the field and the area. But the reality is that since Jubilee and even ENI, Sankofa Jinyami, we've not seen any real, push. Hess was there for quite a while, but left. And Exxon has also left. It just seems to me that there might be better prospects elsewhere. And we're talking about offshore Guyana and Suriname, where lots of discoveries have been made by Exxon and, of course, by Hess together with Sinnock. So it really begs the question about the investment being made. It just means that our environment is more difficult, and so the risk is higher, and so the costs are more.
Yeah, I don't think our environment necessarily is more difficult. So I work in this industry. I talk to investors all the time. And of course, countries are competing for the same petrodollar investments, right? And it depends on the materiality of the resource base that you've got, which also is a function of like your tax regime or fiscal regime, etc. But if you actually look at the prevailing tax regime in Ghana is actually in the middle of the pack. So it's not necessarily like the most onerous or most difficult environment to actually do business in when it comes to oil and gas.
But didn't the amendment of the Petroleum Revenue Management Act in 2015 make it more difficult for companies?
It didn't, and I'll tell you why. So, okay, we increased the carried and participating interest from hitherto it's about 10 to 15%.
Yes.
And then there were a few other minor adjustments here and there, but
there were more fees being charged by the Petroleum Commission. Yes, the local content requirements became stronger.
The cumulative package is what one metric you use to assess this is the government take, right? Which is like a benchmark across the board. And if you look at the government take in Ghana for a number of the oil fields, it's actually one of the lowest in the world. It's between 55 and 60%. If you add the carried interest rate, it's about 70%. The IMF has an estimate that says that what constitutes a decent or reasonable government take is between 60 and 85%. So we are just right in that ballpark figure. So I don't think that what we have in terms of the investment environment is necessarily disincentivizing to investors. What has happened is that there are other opportunities for investors, of course, elsewhere, like in Guyana, where Hess left here, went there, and they've got 10 times more the resource discovery than you've got here in Ghana. And then now there's, the bigger conversation about like energy transition, et cetera. Fine. The question then becomes, what should be the policy response of government or, say, the national oil company to this? Does that then entail or mean that because people are leaving and, people talk about quote-unquote stranded asset, we should necessarily be buying any asset that is on the market? What other strategic options are there? So in this particular case, we know, for example, that GMPC could possibly, if it's all about reserves and production that they want, there are a couple of other assets right here within the Ghana offshore jurisdiction that they could possibly buy, and which even are currently producing and has, relatively lower cost of production as well. So the argument really is not so much about the extenuating or external factors per se, as for me it is to do with let's interrogate the specific transaction that is on the table and its merit, and we can situate that within the bigger policy discourse.
All right, and you're watching The Key Points here on TV3 and 3FM. It's also live on DSTV 279, and you can follow us online at 3news.com. We take a quick break and we'll be right back. You're welcome back to The Key Points. Feel free to send your questions to us on 055 698 789. 05536988789. Let's now go back to our Zoom where we fixed our audio challenges and welcome Dr. Sulemana. Thank you very much, sir, for your patience. Good morning.
Good morning to you, and good morning to your cherished viewers.
Thank you.
And you and Ben.
Yeah, thank you. So I understand that you support the deal, but before you tell us why, what do you make of the numbers put out suggesting that the valuation of these blocks are overpriced?
Yeah, thank you very much. I'll put on record that absolutely I have no problem with these valuations and stuff going on. And I think that's an excellent thing to do because if you quite remember, this deal had bipartisan support that quickly slipped through Parliament. And so it is agencies like CSOs to further delve deep into what is in the figures, what are the numbers. And I think Ben and Theo, they delve so much into that. And I think so for the numbers, I think they can continue to question that. In fact, at the end of the day, it will only give us value for money. And I absolutely, I don't have any problem with that. Yeah.
But the fact that Parliament approved it as a bipartisan decision doesn't make it, right, or doesn't mean that we've gotten value for money. Shouldn't we have done that interrogation before the approval?
Yeah, that's correct. And that's why I think, in future, involving, we have to have broad-based involvement. I think what I tend to notice is the fact that there's been some gaps. You can hear Ben Baji saying, they try to reach GMPC, they are not getting that. And then on the other hand, Keke Sapon is saying his doors are open. So I want to look at it in a different perspective. I'll be frank with you, Jifa. I'm an upstream player, and I understand the business and I understand what goes on. So I just tell you why I think we need to sanitize the deal, but we shouldn't throw it, as it is. You shouldn't throw it that way. Now, number one, we have what we call a tectonic movement, and that is real. Movement in the sense that we have upsurge in the world of renewables. If you just take yourself back some few months ago, we have three things that happened in the industry, and it was not serendipitous. It was all calculated and well planned. We had environmentalists winning a landmark case against Shell in Netherlands. We have ExxonMobil, they were able to displace about two of their board of directors by climate change activists. And the third one was, the release of IEA report, a damning report that sort of suggests that, if we have to achieve net zero by 2050, we have to stop investment into the world of hydrocarbon. That is a killer, I'll tell you as a player. If we stop investment into the world of hydrocarbon, that ends it. Now, where I will extend the discussion to the fact that now, if our case or our situation is a peculiar one, we have certain things we call ESG. Jifa, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Very good. We have ESG, what we call environmental social governance. Now, this environmental social governance is gathering a lot of momentum, to the extent that, capital, going out to get capital from the capital market is becoming constrained, and it's becoming so competitive. And so what it will mean is that players now have to look inwards, like it or not. Where I work, I think we started with 20%. I can tell you that my corporation is now having 60%. You have to start somewhere. So I don't support the idea that, okay, GMPs have been given a whole year, about a decade ago, they've been giving money about $1 billion, they have not been able to drill a well. So should we not, should we leave it like that? That is, for God's sake, that's our upstream. And we don't have anything than that. And I can tell you that, and I'm not saying that, the value, they shouldn't question the value. That is undoubtable, and I support that. And they should keep questioning the value until we get value for money. But let's not lump up things as if nothing is happening in the global phase. A lot is happening, and it is moving very fast. And so where I was coming to land is the fact that, getting money in the capital market is becoming constrained. It's becoming expensive because of what this ESG requirement. So you just look at this, let's play the devil advocate. Assuming ENI and Talo, as we speak now, they exit Ghana, we don't have upstream again. That's a fact. If ENI and Talo exit Ghana as we talk now, our upstream is collapsed.
No, but if Talo and ENI decide to exit Ghana, it may only be because they've got another buyer. It may be a buyer that has expertise in ultra deep or deep water production, and that may not be an entire loss.
That's when you are lucky. ExxonMobil have left. Have we gotten anybody? We are still struggling. So the idea, I know people don't buy into the idea of stranded asset. I completely subscribe to that, and then we are getting there.
Okay.
So what I'm trying. So that's why I believe. Sorry, come again.
Just a quick one. So I wanted to ask. So you support the energy transition argument?
Oh yes, and it's real. See, my company is typically upstream, and it's we call it petroleum development of Oman. Now we just metamorphose into energy development of Oman. If you look at the amount of transition, the amount of renewable energy push that is going on, even in that space, that is high. Okay, so we don't have to sit down at a point in time that investors leave and then we can't take care of our destiny. That's just what I'm saying. We need to have our upstream retooled. So questioning the figures is perfect. In fact, I'm happy about the whole thing, because if you look at, because of the Bryce Simon and Ben Boachi and their critique, their detailed and in-depth critique of the analysis, I think that you just heard, we just heard that we're going to have Bank of America to do another evaluation. That's the beauty of the whole thing. So I don't want us to lump it as if everything is bad. No, that it cannot be bad. It cannot be bad investing in your upstream. That cannot be bad.
Okay, so
all right. So, but getting value for money is also paramount. I don't have any problem with that.
Okay,
but let's not throw the bit. Okay, go ahead.
Just a quick one, and then I'll come back to the studio if you can answer this briefly. So I asked Ben Boachi whether we should focus on one field, the Pecan field, which is a development field. Good work has been done there, instead of focusing as well on the Nyankom field, which is exploratory and the resources are unverified and unquantified. If we were to look at the deal again for a focus just on Pecan, isn't that more realistic?
Yeah, that's fine. It's all about the risk profile, like Theo mentioned. See, before you enter into any of this field, you have to do a kind of what we call risk assessment in terms of your cost-benefit analysis. And so if you look at that, of course, we are told that AGM, we haven't done appraisal yet. So we can say that, the risk profile in quantum-wise is high. But Pecan field, I believe it's been in a way of, it's been the risk to some extent. But where I was also looking at is the Votain Basin. I thought also that's another opportunity we could have looked at, which is onshore. So depending on where we want to go, I think we should just do analysis of the risk profile, see where the risk is minimal, because we don't have zero risk. We have to look at where we can minimize the risk to what we call as low as reasonable practicable, whereby your investment or the cost-benefit analysis favor you. Okay, so yes, Pecan field, of course. If you want to compare Pecan and AGM, I'll 100% say that Pecan in terms of risk profile is significantly lower than AGM.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Suleiman. And let me come back to the studio. Interesting thoughts from him. Do you agree with the energy transition argument? And for the uninitiated, energy transition is just really the movement from using what we know as the normal fuels, petrol, diesel, and all that fuels. Commercial fossil fuel, and moving into renewable energy like solar, wind power, biofuels, and the like.
Yeah, what COVID, for example, has actually done is, to an extent, catalyze the rate of the transition, right? What we don't know fully as yet is how the transition will pan out. Right.
How it will pan out in Africa or globally?
Globally, including in Africa. So the argument really is that some say we have a 20-year window to maximize our oil resources, because by that time you will have had renewables fully kicking in. Others also say, well, you probably are looking at a 30, 40-year window, or we're even talking post-2050 before that happens. The point here really is that depending on the state of the world, you are being forced to think strategically about how these scenarios ultimately will play out. But in relation to Yusuf's point, is that we have seen certain oil companies and majors make certain actions on the basis of what they perceive or feel to be the threat of the energy transition. And so we're seeing divestment of assets, etc., all over the place, and investment flows also possibly being curtailed as a result of that. That would have some impact on your upstream industry. It may have some impact even on oil market as well. That's all given. We know that. The question then becomes, as a country, what should you do in relation to this transition? Is it a threat or is it an opportunity? Because both ways would inform certain actions. So if you perceive it as a threat, as sometimes we're attempting to do here, then let's quickly maximize our hydrocarbon resources and produce and get out of there before you kind of lose those potential revenues. If you see the transition also as an opportunity, then can you create or build new industrial clusters, for example, leveraging the new technologies that the transition presents? That's also another thing. But specifically in the context of the threat side of things, when it comes to upstream, does then that mean that because there's a transition and people are leaving, we should sell things or buy it rather at any price that is being given to us? That is where a number of us really have the challenge. Personally, I don't dispute the fact that there is some transitioning happening, and that has affected the investment environment, which even to the extent why maybe companies like Aka and the rest are even struggling maybe to raise financing, and I use that advisedly, maybe, right? But it doesn't necessarily mean that as a result of that, we should just go and buy the asset at whatever price that is being quoted. That really
That
is,
for
I
you
think,
is
the distinction that needs to be made.
all right. Ben, your thoughts on whether really we will be significantly affected by the energy transition model. I find that maybe for Africa, we are still an emerging, continent. We're growing. There's still a lot of movement. Lots of people are still buying cars. There's a lot of travel that's still to be done continent-wide. I'm just wondering really if it's realistic to think that the energy transition will affect us significantly, which is why we must have a foothold, or GNPC should take a foothold in this deal.
Yes, I think if we have had a problem with GNPC using the transition as the basis for this particular transaction, and we've been careful to isolate the transaction from the entire transition conversation. And that is why if you check what civil society has been doing, we've been looking at this particular transaction and what it means for Ghana, what the numbers are, what the history of the bloc is. The question about how Africa will be impacted by the transition, research is still ongoing to really look at what the impact could be and where Africa will be in that space. And I see here the assumption that the world will not need the oil and Africa will still need it. And if you speak to many people, that is the kind of conversation they want to paint, that we have to continuously use fossil fuel even if the world doesn't need it. And that, for me, is an error that we are making. We are assuming that if everybody in the world is moving to electric cars, the African will continue to use diesel-based or petrol-based cars. That is a wrong assumption. You have to speak to the African first to find out whether he is going to move into an electric car. And we have many aged cars around. So even for us to transit to an electric car, if it becomes cheaper, could be faster than even in the West, where they have brand new cars and they are still producing some, they haven't stopped. So they have a much longer lead time to even transition in terms of automobile than we have. And we saw the Ministry of Energy commissioning an assembly plant of electric cars. Are we joking about that one? We need to speak to the people to gauge their appetite. Are they going to stay with fossil fuel cars, or are they going to move to electric cars when it comes? So those are areas where research is still ongoing. So the specific question about this transaction is what we need to interrogate much more, and examine the excuses that we are given on stranded asset. If you're talking about stranded asset, it is not Pecan that is stranded. Pecan is a project that is supposed to move into production. So the company decides to move into production or relinquish and go by our laws. It's not a stranded asset. Your stranded assets are the ones that you have not discovered. Are you going to move aggressively to be able to make new discoveries by investing into exploration? And you're saying that the exploration budget is squeezed because the market is not responding to investment in fossil fuels. So is GNPC going to take up that role and begin to explore? As we speak, they are operators of 3 blocks. They haven't drilled a well. And you learn by doing. You were in Tallow. Tallow hires contractors to drill. They don't drill themselves. So the drilling companies have the engineers that will support you to do the drilling and the necessary learning, and you progress to be an operator. Isn't it Modec that is operating managing Tallow's assets? Is GNPC going to be the all-in-all operator with all the capacity that he claims he wants to learn to operate a block? What is it in an operator? roll.
Okay.
So those are the small screens we want to diffuse. To say that if you are talking about stranded asset, those are the assets you have not discovered. Those are the terrains that you are saying Exxon is exiting. What are you going to do with that block? Are you going to go in there and explore for it? The market is not responding to oil investment. Why are we going to borrow the 1.65 billion if we wanted to do that?
There's a question,
without the budget coming in.
There's a question here, and it's from Kwame. It says, my elementary understanding of the existing agreements between Ghana and ACA and AGM on one hand is that if these two companies fail to live up to the agreements with Ghana and they could not develop or find a buyer, the fields would revert to the Republic of Ghana as owners of these fields without the country having to pay anything at all. Can your experts throw some light on this for me? Theo?
Yeah, precisely. I mean, so what governs the relationship between ACA or any IOC and the state is the petroleum agreement. And within the petroleum agreement, there are specific provisions that says that, for example, during the exploration phase, if you don't develop or don't even find anything, then you relinquish parts of the block back to the state, which they can then offload to the market. If you also decide that you're going to even leave entirely, even having made the discovery at some point, and you want to write down the value of the asset, that goes automatically back to the state, because by our laws and by the Constitution, the asset or the resources are vested, I think, in the president for and on behalf of the state. If you read Article 269, I believe, of the 1992 Constitution. So yes, the question that is coming through is absolutely right.
Then why don't we rather do that?
It goes back to what some of us have said, which is that why rush this? Because clearly, all the indications and things that at least I've seen so far indicates to me that there seems to be some attempt to push through or force through the deal. And I'm like, okay, let's take a step back and actually interrogate not only the numbers, but the bigger strategic imperative. So let's buy or say the argument about the transition is true or is happening. What do you want to do at a wider government level in terms of your response, right, to that? It surely cannot just be a piecemeal approach. So that's why, in my view, I've called and said that we need to really take a bit of a step back and begin to actually interrogate it. But the way it's being done and made to look like now, it just comes across to me like it's just being forced through. I mean, remember, this is the same country where only 7-8 years ago, we sent 8 petroleum agreements to Parliament under a certificate of emergency, similarly with bipartisan buy-in as well. And down the line, most of those blocks, people are not producing from it. So we have made policy mistakes in the past, and it looks as though we are repeating some of those same policy mistakes without taking a step back to reflect on why we are where we are.
Let me come to Dr. Sulemana. So why don't we rather take our time? I mean, there's no rush, don't you think?
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, there is no, and I think that's what is currently ongoing. The fact that, they've elected, Bank of America, to do further valuation. For me, if you get value for money, that is beautiful. And that's actually what is ongoing. This kind of talks up and down is actually leading to, a bit of focus. So what we need as people, as Ghanaians. So at the end of the day, this kind of talks, when you aggregate them, it will illuminate what actually we are aiming to get. So yes, value for money is excellent. But if I just remember, time is not waiting for anybody. I'm not saying we should rush this deal, but just remember the perspective that I'm talking about. I told you that in this industry, what Ben mentioned first, that and I think you also alluded to the fact that capital is not readily available. Before, capital wasn't available. And COVID had just catalyzed the whole system of, how fast we want to go through this journey, okay? And so it will come to a time that it is coming very soon, that seeking money from the outside, from outside, going to the capital market, there are going to be a lot of strings attached to that. And that will make borrowing very expensive. And so that's the aspect we are looking at. You can say, okay, Ghana, we have a particular situation. No, we are in the global community. Ghana, we are still, heavily dependent on borrowing from outside. Now, what about when time comes that, there are a lot of bottlenecks in this borrowing that we cannot borrow, okay, and that we cannot invest into our asset. So I'm saying that we should not rush, but there is no time waiting. We don't have time, the maximum time waiting for us, to say, okay, there's no need to rush this deal, or there's no need to rush this deal, or there's a need to rush this deal. What I am calling for is the fact that, GMPC and then the CSOs, they have to work together. That's paramount, because if you look at, everybody's calling the same shots. So what is the problem? I think the problem is mostly about the numbers. But if you talk about the numbers and you tend to negate this transition aspect of it, I think we are making a very big mistake. Okay, from where I am coming from, it is actually the NOCs. It is actually the. So let me just land there quickly. It is actually the NOCs who are championing energy transition, and I would state categorically that I believe hydrocarbon resources will be with us for the next 2 decades, 3 decades, or maybe 4 decades to come. All right. So if you flip the coin anyhow, whether transition is coming or transition is not coming, we just need to make sure that we retool our upstream. Let's not wait. Let's try to retool it, make it vibrant, so that in any eventuality that we are caught, flat-footed, maybe anybody exiting, without we prepared, and that's going to be a very big problem. So that's the argument. So I don't have any problem, absolutely. If you understand me, I don't have any problem with what is going on, and I think it's perfect. It can only make our system very strong. It can only make our system very resilient and robust, and so that should go on.
Why not invest in a field that is producing? We know that one of Tullow, or one of the Jubilee partners, Anadarko, has a new deal with Occidental and another company in the US. Why not then buy Anadarko's stake? Why not buy stakes where they are producing, money comes to you, and then you can use that to invest in maybe a virgin field that you're not sure of? Isn't that more value for money instead?
That's again, it comes to a strategic decision, and GMPC has to be fully responsible for that. And so if whatever happened and the deal goes, where Ghanaians don't want it, GMPC will take full responsibility for that. So deciding whether, we want to invest into our existing field or want to go into areas that haven't been invested, it is just a matter of strategic decision. And so I don't really have problem with that. Yeah.
All right. Then let's read some messages that have come to us. And this one from Aziz Inwa, and he says, I'm scandalized regarding the GMPC acre deal. It's obviously clear that some state actors seek to make money out of this. The inconsistency and rhetoric from the state actors is worrying to some of us, because the amount of money going into this deal could have built some 300 brand new SHSs, and it could again have constructed the dual carriage road from Nkoko to Kumasi to Hamile. In fact, the government should protect the public purse and stop the big grammar, fix the country now. Another message says, on the GMPC acre deal, I think the price sale on this is too high on the remaining, looking at what remains on the ground. It will be better for the oil to remain underground rather than for them to take from Ghanaians. That's from Abladi, from Ifiakuma Zongo in Takrady. Abdul Razak from Boku says there must be transparency in this acre GNPC deal. We must get value for money. GMPC and government needs to come again. And Charles Nyame from Asaman Kesi writes, ever since the MPP government took over in 2017, it's been a chain of scandals, and this is the latest with the GMPC acre deal. And this is being attacked with such pure arrogance. And the sad part is the majority of Ghanaians who are suffering the consequences of this small group of people who are benefiting. God save Ghana. Thank you very much for your messages. You can send us some more on 055-369-8789. Let me come back to our studio guests. So, Mr. Boakye, I think one of the criticisms for GMPC is that we've not seen them engage fully in an operatorship. And the view is that we need to see them demonstrate that this is an organization that has been criticized for receiving lots of money from their various stakes and carried interests, and yet the money is deployed in manners that have been criticized. What should GNPC do to earn the trust of the public such that if really they want to become an operator, which was ideally part of their vision and should have been implemented by 2020, and the time has passed, what should they do such that we can have confidence that they will do it? I know you've mentioned that Modec is an FPSO manager, not just even in Ghana, but in Brazil and Mexico. What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, and even just before that, I want to touch on the investment conversation a little bit. You know, we are making an argument that the market is not interested in oil operations. We are shifting focus. The market is shifting focus to renewables, and this is a new conversation where, when the market is not interested, we are calling on the state to now go to the same market and say, instead of the oil industry securitizing the investment, the state want to securitize it. And that is a new conversation in this whole energy transition conversation that we're having. Which country is doing that? None. So if Ghana wants to go into that arena where we're using the budget to support GNPC's acquisition, we need to really interrogate that to ensure that the risks are really covered. Otherwise, we're just doing the same thing. The market says they're not interested. You go and borrow more or less for development, and you push into oil and gas. So it's a question about whether you invest your borrowings into building schools, building hospitals, building roads, or go and use it looking for oil. And that is the conversation that we've been asked to engage in. And it's a very, very new terrain. That's what we're saying, that we need more time to dissect all the aspects of this transaction. It's not just the values. And it comes back to your question about how does GNPC become an operator. And we have shown in our conversation that GNPC has just not been willing to be an operator.
Is it fair to say they're not willing? It's an expensive business. I mean, a lot of the companies use their reserve-based lending to borrow, GNPC, and then they go back and renegotiate with the banks.
GNPC has spent on anything and everything apart from oil drilling. And you know that. They are building schools, they are building hospitals.
Which is not a bad thing.
That is not their job. Are they quasi-government?
They have corporate social responsibility. So also do your
function. That cannot be more than. I mean, does Talo spend more on corporate social responsibility than drilling wells?
No.
Does Exxon do that? There is no serious oil business that does that, and they have shown consistently that they are not interested in becoming an operator. Because if you had to trade off, using $40 million to go and drill, or piling up your organizational structure, or ballooning your staff from 300 to over 600, those are choices for a corporation to do. And they have chose to do the inefficient thing rather than becoming an operator. And we have shown that for all that we have given them for the past 10 years, about $1 billion, they have not decided to use even $50 million to do the needful or to drill for a well. So the right thing to do, if coming back to your question, is to go back to the blocks that they have taken as operators. If you are saying that you are an operator and you're holding on to the blocks and you cannot drill, then give it up.
How about the suggestion that they could buy into fields that are producing, for instance, and grow from there? Because it only takes money to get money. So if you invest in a field and you are getting money, then at least you can invest it in another field instead of just investing and you're not sure if you are getting anything in return.
No, I mean, that is also another conversation that we can have. And you cited the exit of Anadako, which is available. I think they are looking at about $600 million for a producing field. All right. But GNPC is not interested in that. They want to take one that they are not sure. It has to go in. And Talo is here, ENI is here. On all the three fields, the projected production, we never met them. All right? So there are risks until you get into production, before you really see what is possible to be extracted from the ground. But they rather want to go into that risk, whilst, they're making arguments that They don't need to go and drill and operate their field from the beginning. And what we are saying is that you don't need the tutelage or the apprenticeship that they are seeking from ACRE to be able to become an operator. When Talo came, they were not operating giant fields. They used the same contractors, the same MES, the same Schlumbergers, the same Modex, who are doing the work. And the engineers are also learning, and they are procuring the engineers who can support them to be able to operate the field. The amount of money that GNPC gets from Talos and all the companies for technology support can even procure or recruit the kind of engineers that GNPC wants with a relevant capacity to manage fields and operate them. So when they are talking about experience, I don't think they want to be producing FPSOs or they want to be producing the subsea structures. What you're looking for is capable men who can design wells, who can be able to detect, problems when they look at data. Those are the capable people you are looking for to be able to assemble the needed technology in the well to be able to manage a field. So what is this fuss about? We want to be an operator, we want to learn, we want to spend so much time and bring in ACRE as the extraordinary company that can train you to become the operator. They are just refusing to do the needful. And that's the point we are making to them. It wouldn't cost them $10 million to recruit the right men and people. I mean, Dr. Yusuf is there, he works on the fields. It doesn't cost that much to do that. They are just refusing to do the needful and just using that as an excuse to get the budget to support this kind of transactions.
Dr. Champong, should our resource remain below the ground?
You need to exploit and extract it. I think the conversation, picking up from where Dr. Yusuf and then Ben have left off, is really about the role or the strategic role of GNPC in the Ghanaian economy and specifically within Ghana's upstream sector, right? Because you look at the investment spend that GNPC has made over the last maybe 12 or so years since at least First Oil, and you try and analyze that vis-a-vis their core mandate as defined in the law, PNDC Law 83. There are some questions, rightfully so, I believe, that they need to actually answer in relation to their core mandate of looking, exploiting, and searching for oil. I think some people are making the argument now is that, okay, we made mistakes in the past, so give us another opportunity to correct ourselves that kind of mistake. But the famous tree saying, say, "Abobi bekawa nifrim," and I say, "Kwatrikasi obema bibia bisanidin," something along those lines. So that's where I think some of the issues that people have comes from. But also the going forward, I think the bigger conversation really in relation to this whole mandate thing then becomes, okay, if you want your national oil company to play a bigger role, maybe because of energy transition, maybe because other IOCs are leaving, etc., where should they start focusing from? That's number one. Number two, you would have to amend, for example, in Ghana's case, the Petroleum Revenue Management Act to allow the national oil company, GNPC, to actually go and borrow on the market, because currently they are constrained from doing any reserve-based lending as well. But even when we do all of those things, it comes back, okay, how then do we ensure, given the history, some of the things Ben is talking about, how do we ensure that they do not repeat some of these mistakes where in some years the amount that is spent on, say, corporate social investment is the same as what you're spending in operational expenditure for one of your fields, right? You see some inherent inconsistencies in there. You can argue that, okay, GNPC is not just a national oil company. It has a national mandate. So maybe they need to buy the social license to operate. That argument is there. But at the core is that you need to grow the asset base. You need to increase and maximize the revenues before you can even make those CSR, CSI type investments. So I think we're having an important conversation here, which is really about what is the role of GMPC within this whole architecture of the upstream environment, given that some energy transition or whatever may happen at whatever point or period in time. And if we then need to retool the National Oil Company and even amend, say, the Petroleum Revenue Management Act to accommodate or allow them to borrow to finance certain acquisitions, then we have to interrogate the quality of those acquisitions that are being made vis-a-vis other investment options that are available to them. And that's where, I think we need to have that conversation.
Dr. Suleimana, you say that at least there should be an opportunity to start. But the question I also wish to pose relates to our legislators. So there's a question about whether really they even delve deep into these issues. I know there are some members of parliament who've, been in the energy industry for a bit, but there's a sense that at the parliamentary level, these kinds of conversations should be what we have at the committee level or even have debated in parliament. We are not getting enough of that. And that is why by the time this kind of suggestion about, well, this is what we want to do comes out, there's a whole hullabaloo.
Yeah, you are spot on. And I can tell you that even though we are saying it is bipartisan, there are a lot of members from each side, whether NDC or NPP, who are terrible against, the deal outright.
Really? That's not the sense I've gotten.
Of course, yeah, of course. I'm just telling you that's the whole thing. So, and that is where the importance of, agencies like CSO become very critical. See, I like the fact that the CSO, they have been able to eliminate the whole idea, and conversation is ongoing. And I can tell you that as long as these conversations are ongoing, we are getting to a point where we're going to get a very good deal. All right. So Ben mentioned a point, and I think you also mentioned that point. GMPC, as a matter of fact, they have to be focused. That's emphatic, and that's very clear. And so if you are focused as an NOC or a national oil, a company, then your mandate has to be clear. And the mandate is there, it's written. See, we have a lot of, if you go to the PRM, everything is well demarcated and well written. But unfortunately, for whatever reason, I don't know why we're unable to follow this. And there are no punitive measures, when they diverge, from where they are core mandate, nothing happens. For instance, I am terribly against holding onto blocks. For my place, you cannot hold block more than 7 years. They will give you first 3 years. Another 3 years, then 2 years, that's all. And even the first 3 years, the next one they're going to extend, they have to see something substantial going on. Remember, we've been drilling oil, we started extracting oil for over a decade now, Jifa, and we cannot boast up to 200,000 barrels per stream day. That is very, very unfortunate. I know there are a lot of reasons that might be accountable for this. Of course, Talo had some challenges with the tariff bearing, and then COVID also came to play. And if you remember also, Talo had issue with, the court ruling and other things. So of course, the aggregate of all these factors will say that it has fed into, why we are not able to achieve that target. But I think we've gone, we are far, far behind. I think by now we should have been targeting about 1 million barrels. But we are not there yet. Even the 200, we cannot. Okay, so that's why where I stand, I think that we have to make concerted effort. Let's keep bashing GNPC. That is an excellent to do. But let's not say we should not make any attempt to do any investment. See, acquiring access is an excellent thing to do. And like Ben mentioned, people are asking that GNPC, they don't have the state-of-art technology to do that. You don't need state-of-art technology. That's why I go for acquiring the asset. See, when you have the asset and you are the majority shareholder, the beauty is you call the shots. Every employment, you have to take care of that. Every supply chain, hiring, everything is done by you. And that's how can we control it. Talo is having a field, but Modet is the operator. Of course, they operate the ENI, they operate the, the FPSO. So that's the whole thing. So that's why I think, acquiring the asset is an excellent thing. That is the only way. It is a panacea to taking care of our destiny. However, the questions that have been asked, the issue of value for money, they are legitimate, and we need to keep hammering. Hammer to the extent that, but my fear is I don't want it to hammer to the extent that we knock down the core mandate. I mean, we try to vitiate what our core mandate should be. So should we stop any activity in GMPs? No, we cannot do that. That's the only thing we have. So whilst we keep hammering for them to do the right thing, let's also make sure that we make concerted effort to retool GMPC. I mean, to make sure that they stay on their core mandate. And then going forward, I think the deal is shrouded with a lot of, dark portions. And I believe that there has to be involvement, detailed involvement. Because I can't fathom Ben saying they are going to kick us upon, and KK Sapon also saying his doors are open. So, so definitely something is wrong somewhere. No. But at the end of the day, they say if two elephants are fighting, it's the grass that suffers. Ghanaians need to maximize the revenue from the oil. We need to create employment opportunity. We don't have time. And I'm saying that this energy transition is not a myth. It is actually not a myth. It is a reality. Though I still believe that hydrocarbon resources will be with us, especially in our part of the continent. But the beauty is that if you look at how the attack is happening from both upstream and downstream, it is phenomenal. Downstream, a lot of EVs are coming. But like Ben mentioned, African continent, we don't have that infrastructure yet. And even the study was done, the amount of money that we need to catapult us into this transition journey is simply not there. And so that's how come some of us are calling the fact that let's invest into our well of hydrocarbon. Those who are very successfully in the investment into their well of hydrocarbon, they are the same people who are very successfully in the energy transition journey. Because at the end of the day, sometimes the proceeds from the well of hydrocarbon is what you have to use for energy transition. That's a fact, and that's what is happening. And that's why I'm saying that our part of the world, it is the NOC that is championing energy transition, and they have a reason for that. Because gravitating from the well of hydrocarbon to the well of renewable is not like a click of a mouse. It has to be about a concerted strategy, where even you have to move through what you call decarbonization strategically before you can get to the green economy.
Thank you very much.
And the problem is that if you look at, that's what I'm saying, the reason why I say time is not waiting. See, ESGs and the momentum they are coming, you go to the capital market and the kind of infringement and the kind of bottlenecks that are going to put around where you are going to borrow, you simply tell yourself that it's better not to borrow. And so that's my point. I don't want us to get to a point where we are asking ourselves, well, how did you get here?
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Suleimana. And we'll take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll take final comments from our studio guests and prepare for our next topic. Thank you very much for staying with us. It's #TheKeyPoints. You're welcome back. It's still The Key Points here on 3FM and TV3, also on DSTV 279 and also on 3news.com. And I guess the key points that we've gotten out of this whole discussion is that it looks like the valuation for this GMPC acre deal is a bit on the high side. The other key point I guess we can discuss is that we are unsure of the quantities below the seabed, for which reason we'll be investing in a field that is exploratory. How about looking at a field that is producing and getting more out of that to do your additional investments? And certainly there is a need to engage civil society on what prospects are in this deal. But let me take final comments from our guests. Let me start off with Ben Boachi. So looking ahead, what would you expect to happen? Do you want Parliament to, backtrack and say, look, maybe we need to take a second look at this? Or you would like GMPC to say, okay, we're going to do a bit more due diligence and come back?
No, I think this has become like a national policy, for government policy, right? So what we want government to do as a responsible government at this point is to now look at GMPC and say, over the last years, we have given you so much to do what you were set up to do. All right, over $1 billion. The responsible thing to do now is to ask what we have done with that and how giving you more will bring us value. And that is what civil society is saying. We have to do that needful thing of examining whether GMPC even has the capacity to absorb further investment from the state. That is fundamental. And then we go into the specific transaction that we are dealing with to see how we generate revenue if, the justification is for us to continue with that transaction. How do we generate value for the Ghanaian people through that transaction? We are saying that the market is not interested in oil investment, but the state is the one going to borrow from the market and give it to GMPC. What is the risk associated with that? We need to interrogate all of this to be sure that we are not going back into that cycle. Because if you drop another $1 billion into an inefficient operation, you will still come out with nothing. All right. The reason why GMPC hasn't been able to optimize the $1 billion is because they have simply been inefficient at spending on their core mandate, ensuring that they can learn by doing. And that's what we are saying, learn by doing. You have taken 3 blocks as operator. Go and drill. Get the service companies to guide you and learn from it. Recruit the right experts. The 600 people that may not be needed, that is not your focus. You have to really make sure that you are recruiting the people who can help you start your journey to becoming the operator that you want to be. All right? The Hearst block is not a stranded asset. It's not part of the conversation when you're talking about stranded assets. You have blocks that people are not interested in, you say, and you are sitting on it, you are not exploring. That is a stranded asset. You have to make sure that every oil that is on that block can be discovered as soon as possible in the interest of, that argument of energy transition. Otherwise, we are only throwing in names and terminologies to confuse the average person.
All right.
Without dealing with the substantive issues. And that's what we think ought to be done now. Let's do that introspection and position the company to do the right thing before you drop any billion into them.
All right. Dr. Champong.
Yeah, I mean, in wrapping up, yes, I like I said, specifically on this deal, some of the numbers need a bit more scrutiny. The government says that they have got Bank of say America or somebody to help them do that. Take a look at it again. Subsequently, when those numbers come, of course, we'll interrogate it. And when the deal that they propose to bring back to Parliament, I'm sure we'll also get the opportunity to interrogate it as well. But the bigger conversation, in my view, really, back to some of the things Ben and you have said, is a bigger national conversation on what we want to see the oil industry in Ghana in the next 10 years. We've done the first 10. What lessons have we learned from that positions us going forward for the next decade vis-a-vis the transition? That I think we need a bigger stakeholder forum or dialogue to really dig deep on these set of issues. But as it stands now, I unfortunately don't even think that oil is the panacea to our development. Thank you.
All right, and your final comment, Dr. Yusuf.
Yeah, so thank you. I think I shared with Ben and Theo's submission. First of all, GMPC has to be focused, really, because all these questions are coming because of past history. But I always repeat that you don't judge, you use past history to say that, okay, we are not going to do anything at all. Let's fold our arms and say that, no, we cannot do that. We need to retool our upstream. Our upstream is begging, for retooling. And I think this is one of the starting points. Let's keep hammering the numbers. And the beautiful thing is that this kind of conversation should go on. And going forward, Jifa, I think GMPC, they have to involve the CSOs in most of these deliberations. I think they have beautiful ideas. And for all you know, we are all fighting for one country, which is Mother Ghana. If we save it at the end of the day, that is good. All right. So, but the kind of animosity whereby somebody says somebody is anti-Ghanaian or that, I think that will not augur well for us. So going forward, let's keep on hammering to get the best out of the deal. Now, finally, what I want to say is that, though it is a little bit tangential, see, we have existing players. Fortunately, we still have Talo and ENI who are still entrenched within our shores. And I think that's an excellent thing to do. That's an excellent thing to go. What I do know is Ghana, we have to be able to maximize our gas recovery in particular. Though I'm saying this is tangential, but I'm saying that because from my study, what I noticed is the fact that some of the reasons why we've not been able to optimize our production is because of offtake issues in terms of our gas. So that's very critical. So going forward, the government of Ghana, let's look at that, especially if you look at tallow fields, it is associated gas. So you don't get the oil when you cannot displace the gas. And that is key. All right, so that's where I'll end. I'll just end here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Suleimana, and it's very interesting you brought up the gas conversation, and I think there will be an opportunity for us to really talk about gas, because that's a whole different kettle of fish entirely, yes, and I think that's something we need to do. But I want to say thank you to our guest, Dr. Suleimana, who is an energy analyst. Many thanks to Dr. Theo Achampong, and to you, of course, Ben Boachi. Really appreciate that you've put your expertise before all of us today. Much appreciated. And some of you have sent your messages already. Let me take them. This one from Farouk in Tamale says, seriously, the GMPC Acre deal is another Ejapa family deal. Hashtag fix the country. This one from Paquet at Elembele says the GMPC Acre energy issues, the level of secrecy in this whole deal is a matter of concern. In fact, I don't see this government doing anything extraordinary in the upstream and downstream sectors of our oil and gas industry. The government is only benefiting from what the NDC government put in place prior to their exit. And those were some of your messages. Thank you very much. And remember, it's hashtag the key points live on TV3 and 3FM. And in our next topic, the NDC has been mounting a strong defense for its electoral reform proposals. And they've been speaking about it, and it's been a debate about which comes first as well, constitutional reform, or we go straight to making certain amendments which are easier, changing the rules of court and the like, to ensure that we have some electoral reforms. So all of that coming up next. Our guest is Elvis Ifrie Ankra, the NDC's Director of Elections, and Albert Kofi Ahen, a former Director of Elections at the Electoral Commission. We'll be bringing that to you shortly. But let's hear Nana Atudadze and Professor Kwame Ahoy that addressed the media recently about these issues.
We would urge His Excellency the President to accept the interpretation of the Apex Court, that the Supreme Court, as the correct interpretation of the Constitution and the law, and proceed to urgently activate the processes for the early implementation of the constitutional reforms as set out by the Constitutional Reform Committee on 20th December 2011.
They did not show us which problems they were trying to solve. Nobody has complained about voting hours in this country. So why would you ignore all the problems that we are seeing and then jump to try to resolve an imaginary problem about voting hours, thereby suggesting that we should be closing polls by 3 p.m. It defies logic.
This business about taking to IPAC is ex post facto. That's why sometimes you see, by their own conduct, they create the impression as if perhaps somebody is pushing them to do something. Because this is the official response. That response was very clear. We have received your proposals and we will get back to you. Sent to the Electoral Commission. So what then is the basis a few days or weeks after go to IPAC?
IPAC meetings are called by the Electoral Commission. So when we submit a proposal to the Electoral Commission, it is the responsibility of the Electoral Commission to table it at the IPAC meeting, which it convenes. So for me, it baffles me that it says we should table it at IPAC. As I said, let her show us the IPAC secretariat. We'll go and table it there.
Thank you very much for joining us on the Key Points Live on TV3 and 3FM. And today we're talking about the NDC's electoral reforms, probing the proposals, assessing the viability. And I know we had an initial discussion on this some 2 weeks ago, but at that time, the NDC hadn't really fully come out. But this week, they've put up a strong defense of their proposals, and it's raised a lot of discussions about what comes first, what's the priority. Do we engage in constitutional reform to get some of those reforms they've put forward through, or do we amend the rules of court? Do we amend the Political Parties Act that will allow for some of the other reforms which seem probably more doable to go through? Today we welcome Elvis Afriyie-Ankrah, the Director of Elections for the NDC, to our studios. Good morning and welcome, Mr. Afriyie-Ankrah.
Good morning, Jifa, and thank you very much for having me.
It's been quite a while.
Yes. I haven't seen you since your other incarnation.
Let's also welcome Albert Kofi Arhen, who will be joining us via Zoom. But let me start with Mr. Afriyie-Ankrah. So with the NDC's views about electoral reform, there are questions about whether this is about how you felt treated, how the party felt treated during the 2020 elections, or has the NDC really been on a mission over a period to, put forward their views about how we can improve our electoral system?
Thank you very much. That's a very good question. Let me start by putting the issues in context. So you recall that after the 1992 elections, the MPP boycotted the parliamentary elections because they felt that the processes were not fair and transparent. And so we had virtually an NDC in parliament with the Eagle Party. And so civil society, donor community, everybody felt that you needed to create a platform where the then opposition will have the opportunity to also spell out their grievances and issues. And that's how come IPAC was born under Dr. Kuja Farijan. So IPAC was born to create a platform where we could generate consensus on electoral issues and put in place systems, mechanisms, processes, and procedures to improve upon our electoral system. Because you know that the law is very clear about the independence of the Electoral Commission. However, when it comes to practical governance, stakeholder consultation is a key component of practical governance and administration. So the IPAC has been able to churn out a lot of reforms that has enhanced our entire electoral architecture. For example, moving from opaque ballot boxes to transparent ballot boxes, moving from the introduction of counting of votes at the polling station and declaring same, the use of photo ID cards, the biometric register that we have today, to the extent that at the time that they were even going to procure the first biometric register, there were two committees that were formed at the IPAC, a technical committee and a legal committee. And therefore, even the constitutional instruments, CIs that are drafted and sent to Parliament, the political parties had an input. And then when it comes to the procurement of biometric or other equipment, the political parties, the technical committee also had an input. And so that was how the IPAC evolved, and it's been very, very useful. So after the 2013 Supreme Court decision, the MPP went to court. The court, in giving its verdict, actually pronounced that the EC should reform itself. And so consequent to that, the EC then set up a committee. And I have the committee's report here, a report of the Electoral Reform Committee submitted to the Electoral Commission of the Republic of Ghana, April 2015. And you can see the membership. We had Georgina Opokwa Mankwa, Mrs. Rebecca Kabuki Ajal. These are all members of the EC. Johnson Asidun Ketia represented the NDC. Kwabena J. Japan represented the MPP. Mr. James Kwabena Bonfe representing the CPP. Mr. Enin Kofi Addo representing the YPP. Dr. Ransford Jampo, member representing the IEA CSOs, Mr. Kwesi Jonah, member IDEC, and then Dr. Franklin Odro from CDD, and Mr. Christian Owusu-Pari was the secretary. So they came out with a number of reforms, about 15 or so. Now, these reforms came towards the latter part of Dr. Afari-Gyan's tenure. And so he couldn't do anything about it. And then Madame Charlotte Osei came in, and then she was also preparing for the 2016 election, so she couldn't do much about it. And we all know she was removed. Madame J. Mensah came in, and Madame J. Mensah inherited these reform recommendations. Unfortunately, she was not able to implement any of them. And we also found that she took a posture that the EC is independent, and she's not bound by IPAC decisions, and therefore she was not very open to that consensual process that we all had at IPAC. What we found was that over a very short period of time, about 11 political parties were registered. And so you go to IPAC and you have all manner of parties, and then when discussions are had and we come, normally what happens is that issues that we agree on, we move them forward. Issues where there's no consensus, we stand them down, and then we continue the consultation process behind the scenes. In fact, when she was at IEA, she was very instrumental in resolving issues through the political parties platform. So issues that were contentious, we move out of IPAC, we go to the political parties platform, we debate, we discuss, and then we arrive at a consensus. So she then brought in a lot of these political parties, and then when issues come to the crunch, they say, okay, then let's vote.
But is it fair to say she brought in the political parties, new political parties registered for the 2016 elections?
Okay, so the 11 political parties appeared during and then I'm just telling you the practicality of what happened.
But that's aside.
Just beside the point.
So hold on. So voting was not part of the normal process in IPAC,
in the past.
Subsequently,
yes.
During Mrs. Mensah's era,
exactly.
That's what has happened.
And then you see the spirit and posturing. There was something went wrong, and we will not listen to you. I'm sure you know about people saying the NDC is a threat to Ghana's democracy and all those things. So the whole environment was not congenial, and after the elections, usually after elections, what happens is that, again, it is the political parties together with CSOs, they then discuss the needed reforms. But again, the EC had a meeting and brought out 4 reforms.
Okay, hold on. The CSOs and the political parties did have a post-mortem. CDD, Codeo had that event in Ada. But you chose as the NDC, yes, you were at the Codeo event, but you chose as the NDC not to be at the EC 2-day workshop.
Yes, because we felt that we would not legitimize a process that would not produce genuine and sincere and enduring reforms. As I told you...
But weren't you just being judgmental? Because the elections were over, there's really nothing to fight about anymore.
If the elections were over, and that is all the more reason why you needed a very open and transparent process in a very congenial atmosphere to discuss the issues.
You didn't have that, so you felt you wouldn't proceed then.
So we did a temporary boycott of IPAC. And it's important for people to understand that boycotts are legitimate tools in a democracy, particularly when it's temporary. When you do a temporary boycott, for instance, when people walk out in parliament, it becomes news. Why have you walked out? Then you now explain, because we've tried to use the platform to bring out issues consistently, and it's not been working. So we felt that if we stay, we become part of that process where there was no room for consensual ideas, especially from our side, and there will be legitimizing that process. And so we took a step back and say, okay, let's go back and look at the entire electoral architecture. Because over the years, in any case, every electoral system needs to be fine-tuned. It's like a vehicle. You always need to go for servicing, change the plugs and change the oil, and make sure that the system is fine-tuned. What is our current electoral system? What has been our experiences in the past? Against the backdrop of the reform proposals that have not yet been implemented, and then what we experienced in 2020, what then can we do? So it's not just about 2020 was a catalyst, it was a key factor no doubt about it. But we had to look at the entire electoral architecture. We've been doing this for almost 30 years. What are the things that have been impeding the smooth functioning of our democratic process? What can we do to ensure that the systems, the mechanisms, and the institutions are strengthened such that at the end of every electoral process, we would all be satisfied? For example, in 1992, when the young people were not satisfied with the system, they wrote the stolen verdict. When they now brought reforms, and it's instructive to note that most of the reforms, opaque ballot boxes, transparent ballot boxes, and all those
color ID cards,
most of them came from the MPP. And the NDC at that time, the government in power, we went along with them, you know. And Dr. Ferejan created the atmosphere for us to have those kinds of reforms. So it helps. So reform really does enhance the electoral. So we went back and then we looked at. So we formed a team, and when we formed the team, we said, look, because we are partisan people, we will not lead. So we'll get people who are, they're part of the party, but based on their background experience, they have the broad knowledge and a little above partisanship.
And they evoke a certain, national appeal.
Exactly.
Okay. So that's why you had what?
So
Nana Tudaze
and
Professor Kwame Nahoi.
So we as NDC, we also submitted our proposals to them. And then they also spoke, they looked at existing electoral reforms, the 2015 reforms.
So they looked at the reform document that existed.
Then they looked at international and domestic literature on electoral reforms. They looked at international best practices on electoral systems. They conducted interviews with some former top management staff of the EC. They examined our position paper, and they had access to some documentation from the EC. So following that, out of that came
the reforms that the NDC has put forward.
So we realize that these are proposals, technical proposals. So let's then move the next step forward and now engage civil society and other stakeholders. So we've met a coalition of CSOs. We met a whole
I understand you've met the TUC.
We met the TUC. We met organized labor. You know, there's a group that are outside the TUC.
That's true.
Then we met the TUC too. We've met the US Embassy, UK High Commission, Canadian High Commission. We've met the EU delegation and member states. We've met Christian leaders. We've met the NDC Professional Forum. We've met the National Peace Council. We've met Muslim leaders and so many others. Yes. So we try to subject this to them. Okay, these are our propositions. What do you think?
Okay, so this is not an idea that some people have a perception that it's because the NDC feels aggrieved about how its relationship with the Electoral Commission, specifically the chairperson, deteriorated. And so these reforms don't stem from that.
I mean, it will be untruthful to say it's a part of it.
It's a part of it, but it's broader. It's not the foundation.
It's broader.
It's not predicated
it's
on
broader.
that.
In fact, when we met the TUC, they said, "You people, you sound very nationalistic. Are you sure that in the event that you win power in 2024, you are going to implement these reforms?" And one of them actually took a snapshot. The chairman took a snapshot and said, "I'm going to hold you to your word." And so we tried to go beyond ourselves and say, look, Ghana as Ghana, we've been having several elections. What can we do to improve upon the electoral system? And so based on all these discussions, we've had a lot of fantastic feedback, and the discussions are still ongoing. And we believe that the discussions can only enrich the final input. We've sent a copy to the Electoral Commission. They responded actually and told us that it's being looked at. And that, so we intend to also do an addendum based on the feedback that we've gotten from. So we've collated all the views and inputs, and then we'll send an addendum. And then subsequently, we'll all meet and then look at it.
Okay, based on the feedback you've received so far, which of these, and I know there are some 10 key reforms that are like the big issues, which of these reforms, for want of a better word, are gaining traction?
Okay. So, let me deal with what we consider to be
so what's the big reform issues for you?
Okay, so first of all, the first thing is that we think that the process for appointing the Electoral Commission and the commissioners, it's problematic. And we proposed that indeed the EC chairperson, yes, she'll go through the process should be appointed by the president in consultation with the Council of State. But because the president is also an interested party in an election, more often than not, the EC is then seen as the MPP's EC, NDC's EC. So what you do is that you subject her to prior approval by Parliament. The parliamentarians are the representatives of the people. So when she goes through that process, and with the chairperson of the EC, we're asking for 2/3 of the members of Parliament. So if you're an EC chairperson and you know that you're going to go and face Parliament, and 2/3 of the people are the ones that are going to approve you, it means that, first of all, in even making the choice, the president in making the choice and the Council of State in advising will look out for somebody who has a broad national appeal. That's very important, because you know that you need 2/3 of the members of Parliament to get them through. So the names, when you're doing your shortlist, this name will come up and say, no, this name will not fly, because this name is either 2 NDC or 2 MPP. But you get somebody who all the parties will have relative confidence in the person. So that would help a lot. So
that requires the amendment of Articles 43(2) and 72 of the 1992 Constitution, because the commissioners are appointed by the president. I think that's also entrenched. And then I know that definitely will go through a very long process.
yes.
But that's something you would like.
One of the feedback we got from TUC, the Christian community, is that we should also go further and break this down into short term and long term. Okay? And so this perhaps will be one of the things that we will look at it, not even long term, but medium term. Because the Constitutional Review Commission, of which the current EC chairperson was a member, recommended prior parliamentary approval. And the government white paper on the Constitutional Review Committee also accepted that recommendation. And you know that we are in the process of people are talking about constitutional review. So I don't think it's for nothing that people are talking about it. You know, a democracy must be responsive to the voices of the people. After 28 years of democracy, I think it's about time we start looking at that. So even though it may not be immediate, it's something that I think it will not be long-term but medium-term, because the pressure is growing. We need to look at the whole constitutional architecture. So that's one. Then the second one is that repeal of the requirement for the consent of the AG to be given before the prosecution of electoral offences. As we sit here today, for some strange reason, PNDC Law 284, 1992,
the Representation of the People's Act.
Exactly. That it finds an animal called electoral offences. So ordinarily, when God forbid, I slap you, it's assault. The police will prosecute me. But if that slapping happens within the context of an election, then the law says that you needed the written consent of the Attorney General before I can be prosecuted. This is why there's been so many cases of impunity. I mean, you know about how Akumso, she herself confessed that she fired a gun at a polling station. 8 people have died in an election. Nothing has happened to them. Because... And
the case has been discontinued by the police.
That's what we're hearing now. Yeah. So it creates a culture of impunity. And because the Attorney General, who is a cabinet colleague of these appointees, will find it very difficult to prosecute them. But if you take away that requirement, then the police can go ahead and prosecute them. And you see,
but what difference will that make? The police is also an institution of state where the IGP is appointed by the president. It could be that there will also be still political interference from the highest office of the presidency, and so they may still not prosecute. So
then it means that nothing will work in Ghana. Is that what you're saying? Because ordinarily, when you slap somebody, it's assault. That requirement of prior written notification from the AG creates a barrier. It's a barrier. And so when you remove that, then everybody will know that, look, there's no barrier. If they don't prosecute, then we'll know what to do with it. But
okay, so that requires the amendment of that law.
But it doesn't have to, it's not a constitutional,
one. So that for you is doable in the short term.
Exactly. Then, of course, the special designated courts, that can be done through regulation.
Yes.
You know, and then, of course, the removal of names from the register, those are not very, we'll come back to the
Equal
GBC.
Access to GBC
yes.
by political parties.
Yes.
I really marvel that you raised this, because we are now in an era of digital media, the NDC is streaming its activities live on Facebook, on social media. You even have some online television stations favorable to your cause. I've seen instances where you've advertised even the recent press conference last week, and you welcome everyone. I mean, people come in and you don't turn them away. I think you are getting more media than ever before, and GBC covers you as well. Why has this suddenly become an issue?
Do you know that for the past couple of years, GBC has never covered any of our press conferences? Yes.
Even this most recent one?
Yes.
That will have to be verified.
Yes, you can verify it. I'm telling you for a fact. The major difference...
If GBC doesn't cover, has it really impacted? Everyone knows about these reforms, for instance.
No, the major difference, Jifa, is that Media General is private. You can decide to come or not to come. All the other platforms, they are private. GBC is not private. So they don't have a choice.
It's a national broadcaster.
They are paid by the taxpayer, all of us. And indeed, there is a decided case, Supreme Court, GBC, MPP, New Patriotic Party, incidentally.
Yes. I remember it was J.H. Mensah. It was J.H. Mensah that took that matter to court.
Supreme Court of Ghana Law Report 354. It's clear. So you have situations where the president and any president, NDC, MPP, any president at all during election period, he's cutting swords, he's commissioning projects, he's given 6-7 hours, and then they'll give you 10 minutes.
Okay, but
so
is that also a bit, is that fair to any incumbent government? Because those lines are very thin.
I think that it's a decided case.
Okay.
Okay, so it has to be implemented. I don't want us to dwell too much on that.
Okay, now, but just a quick one on that. But have you had any formal engagement, for instance, with the current Director General about this concern?
Our communication director has done it several. They'll agree, all right, but you know, it's a funny thing. We believe they are not being fair to us, and we think that within the political environment, GBC, which is a state-sponsored finance entity, must obey the Supreme Court.
Okay, so if they don't obey the Supreme Court...
So let's go to proposal number 6.
No, just a quick... So if they don't obey the Supreme Court, then what? You go back to court?
We'll look at it, our legal people. Now, the proposal number 6 is that IPAC should be backed by legislation through an amendment to the Electoral Commission Act 1993. And we say that the IPAC has served Ghana's electoral system well, but because it's informal, the EC tends to ignore some of its concerns or even to marginalize it. And so depending on the leadership style and posturing of a particular EC chairperson, and as I gave you the example of Dr. Kojo Afarijan, who was very amenable, their attitude was like, let's bring everybody together. So if you have somebody else who feels, look, IPAC is not important, and yet the same person then goes to form eminent persons group or committee, or what's the name?
I don't recall.
Now, that formation of the eminent persons is a tacit and silent admission that even though the EC is supposed to be independent, it needs external feedback.
It needs advice.
It needs advice. And therefore, we think that I've given you copious examples of major reforms that have enhanced our electoral process
emanating
that came
from IPAC.
And therefore, it is important that we look at this carefully. And indeed, the EC's own electoral committee in 2015 made this recommendation. It was adopted by IPAC, accepted by the EC at the time. So we need to look at it. So the EC is independent, but what will be the functions of IPAC, for example? Who attends IPAC? You see, when we say these things, people misinterpret it and say, oh, we don't want the smaller political parties. In representation, there has to be a certain logic, okay? Right now, the NDC has 137 seats, MPP has 137 seats. Other parties don't have any seats. When Madame J. Mensah again was at the IEA, she formed a political parties platform. She insisted that it will be made up of parties with representation in parliament. Why is that? Because there's a certain logic to it. If you've participated in an election, you are a major stakeholder, you've won seats in parliament, you then have a stake.
again,
just a quick one. No, you said there was logic to it, but IEA is also a private institution, and they define based on the resources they have.
So I'm coming back to EC IPAC. At the EC IPAC, I told you we've had two committees, a technical committee and a legal committee. The technical committee had Dr. Kweno as a member representing the NDC and Mr. McMenu of the MPP. Usually they will have Kabila or somebody like that as a member
from the CPP.
From the CPP. Or worst case scenario, they will take two people. As you saw in the electoral, as you saw in the electoral reforms membership that I read, there were two people representing. Why did they not say that we have 35 political parties and therefore every single political party must have a member?
But that's just a committee.
It's a committee, but there's a logic. Do you understand me? I'm saying there's a logic to it. Okay, so you have NDC represented, MPP represented. Why didn't they say that every single party must be represented? That's the logic I'm talking about.
Okay, but that's just one committee. IPAC is the...
It's both the legal and
so the
which
technical are subcommittees of the wider IPAC.
Yes, but it is the logic. Does it not make sense that in a situation where you have two major political parties and then other smaller parties, in decision making, there must be some weight as to the inputs of the parties? For instance, in terms of deliberation and everything, every Ghanaian can state his case. But when it comes to critical situations, where, for example, even if you have to vote, you cannot have the same vote. A party that has not participated in any election, has no representation in parliament, has no offices. That is a different matter altogether. But we're saying that when it comes to critical issues that impinge on the future of our elections, there needs to be a clearly defined rules. Otherwise, you have a situation where, when I say it, you say, well, 11 parties appeared. And what we saw was that those parties, when they came in, it appeared as if they came in just to heckle us out of the way so that we won't have a voice. And the whole idea about IPAC is for us to have meaningful inputs. How do we resolve that? We need to discuss it as a country. So
you admit that there is the need to resolve that, because at the end of the day, these other political parties are also supported by Ghanaians who want some input at IPAC. It may also not be fair to say that, well, the two of us, MPP, NDC, we are the biggest. So because of that, it's only our voice that matters.
No, you see, you're getting it wrong. The voice of every Ghanaian matters. Every Ghanaian
matter, you
matter, you know, NDC. But in terms of, that is why in some countries they have proportional representation. We don't have. But I've given you case studies of even the IEA and the EC itself in constituting committees for IPAC. There's a certain logic about the representation. They take into account the fact that, look, these are the two major parties. The other parties, they are important, but because of the weight they have, we will give them maybe 2, 3, 4 representatives. I mean,
there's a worry, though.
Yes.
There's a worry, though, that we may be creating a monster by clothing IPAC with a legal framework. So we've seen political parties have representation in Parliament, you know, virtually have that representation vanish. If we had a legal framework that determined that it was for only political parties with representation in Parliament, for instance, it will mean that by now those parties will find themselves on the back end.
So that is not what we are proposing.
I get that.
Okay.
I get that. But I'm just thinking of the scenarios, because whoever thought that, like the CPP, PNC will not have any representation
so that is why we are not...
thought that we'll have a near split Parliament.
That is why we are not making that argument.
Okay.
Our argument is that there has to be a certain logic. I mean, this is not very difficult. Unless
I understand.
There has to be a certain logic about when we go to IPAC. Okay, who votes? The same logic. All the parties, if there's room, if we have 100 parties, they should come and participate.
But it's about for you are concerned about the votes and those
the decision making process. Okay, there has to be some fairness.
Who would determine what those guidelines or legislative rules would
All
be?
of us.
Okay.
You see, that is why these proposals are out there.
But if somebody feels that they will be disadvantaged, they will not support.
So in 1992, we won by 58%, isn't it? Right? Proposals came for reform. We could have said as a party that I won't agree. So the key issue is, these proposals, do they make sense? Would they enhance our electoral process? I mean, these are the issues that we should look at. I know some people are concerned that if you legislate, let's look at it. Let's listen to the diverse views, And I guess our research team just saw this. IPAC must be regulated by law. And this was on the 6th October 2013. And it was by none other than Gabi Asario Chedako. I'll send it to you.
Okay.
So
IPAC, that's something that you believe can be done in the short term if there is a certain will to make it happen.
Exactly. We will all agree on the rules, and then we'll take it forward. Legislation should also buy the chairperson of the EC as the returning officer of the presidential elections to the introduction. Let me link that to one of the Part B reforms. We felt that the introduction of the regional coalition centers was problematic.
Yeah, there was no proper guidelines to guide how it was implemented.
And the EU reports, EU Election Observer Mission report says, is page 41, is very clear. Page 41 is very, very, very clear. And what is stated very clearly about the lack of transparency in the way and manner in which the regional coalition centers came up. And indeed, the question is, in the past, you always had results coming from the constituencies sent directly to the EC headquarters. And then the party agents will check, and then the results are declared. What happened? What was the problem? We've had 7 elections, and we've had no problem. And then you bring in regional coalition centers, and that rather led to so many problems. And where for the first time in the history of this country, you've had situations where the Electoral Commissioner announced so many different results. It shouldn't happen. So we feel that that is a no.
So there should be no regional coalition?
It's not necessary. It's not necessary. Because you see, at the constituency, at the polling stations, the results are declared, then they are collated at the constituency.
Yes.
Okay? So the agents take their results and they send them to their agents in the strong room. And the EC also sends same to the strong room. So by the time the EC's results arrive, our party agents also have ours. Okay? But you have a situation where we send our constituency results more often than not. And again, it's in the EU report.
You had your data.
There were differences in the summary. Because the regional results were a summary of the various constituencies.
So there was no transparency to see the individual constituency results.
And we've had case studies where there were actually differences. If you go to the AC website today and you take all the 16 regional summary sheets and you add them up, and you take the various constituencies and you add them up, there's a difference.
There's a difference.
And we shouldn't allow these things to happen. So
is there a way to make the regional collation efficient? Because it seemed like a fantastic idea, such that the headquarters would then receive only 16 results, as opposed to 275.
There's even an issue as to the legality of it. And I think our lawyers should look at it. The chairperson of the Electoral Commission is the sole returning officer for the presidential elections. She's the sole. So what is the legal mandate of the regional coalition? In fact, what the CI says is that regional coalition officer. So there's no architecture there, unlike the constituency and the national coalition center at the strong room, so-called, where there's an architecture and there's a system and there's a process to do the checks and balances. At the regional level, there's nothing. And we are asking that, they say, if it then broke down, fix it.
So we should go back to the old system, which works well.
Which has been working very, very well. Indeed, communication between constituencies and the national is sometimes even faster. If you know Ghana very well. So this whole business about,
So we'll take a pause on that, Mr. Efrie Ankra, and we'll come back with the others. But let's just take a quick break. And there's always a riveting conversation with Elvis Efrie Ankra, for those who know him back from his days as a student leader till now. And we'll be right back after this break. You're welcome back to the key points here on TV3 and 3FM, also on DSTV 279 as well as 3news.com. So, Mr. Efrie Ankra, so let's come back to the other reforms. I know that there are a few others that of critical importance to the NDC.
That the EC must by law be made a mandatory party to all parliamentary election petitions, just as is the case in the presidential election petitions. As we state today, the EC is not a party to parliamentary petitions. And then the EC must be a compellable witness to produce all public elections and related material and documents relevant to presidential and parliamentary election disputes. I mean, we all saw what happened in the Supreme Court, and I was there, and it's very sad for Ghana, because I recall when we made the application for interrogatories, we made application for examination of documents. All the judges, they said, oh, why don't you wait? When she comes on the witness box, you will be able to ask those questions. I remember, not once, no, they said it consistently for 3 days when we were making those applications, and they were refusing. Now we get to the time where we wanted her to appear on the witness box, and then they use civil procedures to throw that away. So, as we sit today, there are many doubts. We knew there were issues with the elections, but even to the average Ghanaian, there are many doubts about what happened. That would have been an opportunity for her to come and show Ghanaians documentary evidence. This was the basis on which I declared the elections. Okay, so you declared the first election, you saw the result. Where are the documents? Show us. Let's see. What computations did you do? So that everybody will be clear in his mind. But you have a situation where the EC was cocooned by the Supreme Court, in our view, and then she was not able to account for her actions. And it's very serious. Elections have very serious consequences. And so we think that we must have this regulation. It's very important so that there will be transparency, and other electoral officials will know that when the time comes, because it's a bad precedent,
That it means they won't be held accountable.
Exactly. You must be held accountable by the highest court of the land. For example, you saw in Techiman, where the returning officer, we asked for the collation. It was live. We asked for the spring sheet, the summary sheet. He said, I won't give it to you. I mean, what impudence? Why should somebody paid by the taxpayer is supposed to be a neutral arbiter, and then you have the results, you refuse to give it to us? These things should not happen. So there should be regulation. And then this one, which is very novel, split the EC into two separate bodies.
That has come up. That has come up with some criticism about creating a power bureaucracy,
regulation of political parties. You see.
And want to manage the elections.
Because election management is a major issue.
But do we need a separate bureaucracy for that? Don't we just need efficiency? Don't we need the commissioners to ensure that there is efficiency?
We believe that if it is separated, it will help the EC to focus on the election. They should focus on the election itself, so that you have the EC chairperson calling out results and changing them several times. And then the regulation of political parties. For example, we need to be, my pet topic, I mean, my biggest passion, if there's anything I want to achieve in my political life before I vacate this earth, funding of political parties. That's the root cause of our problem. One of them. There are many. Of course, this is not the time for the foolishness and misbehavior, indiscipline. But that is one major cause. And I am a player. I know what goes on. The amount of money we spend at the end of every 4 years to elect people into office, if you know, you collapse. It doesn't make sense. You see, we got into this democracy without thinking of where the money will come from. The other developed countries, the USA, they have the military-industrial complex. They have the Microsoft. They have all these institutions. They can generate the money. We got into this democracy without thinking of where the money will come from. Where is the money going to come from? If we spend even 5% of our GDP on elections is not productive money. It's the same GDP or money that from the system that is used in the election. Can you imagine if that amount of money can be brought down to half or a quarter, and that money will be used for productive purposes? So we think that we should be getting to the conversation and talking about funding, state funding of political parties.
So that
when
we
the
reduce
state
the
funds,
corruption.
yeah, when the state funds, then you can regulate. Okay, the countries that are able to regulate are the countries that fund. So we give you money, don't go beyond this threshold, don't spend so much. So if you go beyond that, there are stringent sanctions. That is the only way we can solve this problem. Otherwise, that plus greed is a dangerous combination, because people will go and look for money, borrow money, sell their father's properties and everything, borrow money from banks. They come to power,
and then
they have to find money to pay back, and pay back plus greed. So they will steal 10 times, and then apart from the stealing, then they also have to prepare for the next election. And then because now then the election becomes monetized, and so you are not getting true democracy, because people's consciences are bought. Some of the things that happen in this election is completely, I mean, you've seen Auditor General's reports, COVID money and all that. So if we are going to deal with it, you need an office that will regulate the political parties, but the activities, first of all, so it may even be an advantage for the smaller parties. Because you create a threshold, exactly. Create a threshold. Well. Look, yes, you are a small party, maybe you are a regional party, or you are a party that is focused on environmental issues. When the regulations are clear, everything will be clear. And then we will stop this monetization and killing of ourselves for the sake of elections. Yeah.
So you've put out these reforms, and you know there's been a strong defense put up. You've indicated that the EC says they've received it. Yes. Do you have a certain timeline within which you're hoping that at least you can see some come to light?
We believe that because these are not impositions, first of all, the most important is the public discussion and debate, where there are some that we can easily arrive at consensus, even among ourselves, in the public. This can be done, this can be done, this can be done. And mind you, I keep saying that the recommendations are 34, but about 12 of them
are the critical.
Yes, and then some also are coming from the 2015 committee report. So they are not new necessarily. It's just that there are recommendations that have not yet been implemented. So if you look at it from this context, those things are not entirely new. And there are some that quickly, again, a very important point. We think that the voting period of 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. should be maintained.
I'm told that you were at IPAC when the suggestion of closing the polls at 3 p.m. was raised, and the NDC supported it because they said it would prevent anything going on under the cover of darkness. What changed your mind?
I wasn't at that IPAC. I don't know about the IPAC. And our position has been very consistent. Why? You see, first of all, we've had 7 elections, open at 7, close at 5. We've never had any problems. So again, back to the American dictum. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. What exactly are you trying to solve? What exactly are you trying to do with? And they say, oh, we want to prevent collation being done under cover of darkness. Well, when the polls are declared at the polling station, it's moved to a collation center. That process takes between 5 to 6 hours, minimum. So inadvertently, you will definitely have to work in the night.
Whether you close at 3
or not. So that argument doesn't hold at all. In any case, in other democracies, US, everywhere, they work through the night. So what we should rather be looking at is, okay, where we're going to do the collation. How is the environment like?
Provide, availability of people to police the process.
Secondly, don't bring soldiers there, or people who look like soldiers but they have beard and earrings to come and shoot innocent people. We'll talk about that. We have to talk about that because this is the first election in Ghana that 8 people have lost their lives. The president hasn't said anything about it, but let me not digress yet. Then, very, very, very critically, Ghana is not Accra. If you live at Ridge, you live at East Legon, Kokomlemle, you can just stroll and go to your polling station. Those of us who really know Ghana, in Afram Plains, for instance, people have to cross the river.
I
to
know
come
the
and vote.
Dija Islands.
Dija Islands.
You have to cross and travel by boat.
And first of all, the electoral materials doesn't get there early enough. And then by the time the people cross and come, it's 3 o'clock. You have a pandemonium. And then you have a situation where, because electoral materials don't go, we've had situations in previous elections where even voting had to be extended to the next day. 3, most of our farmers and fishermen, they are people who like to go to farm in the morning in the cool of the day, and then they come and go and vote.
Isn't it just because the election day is not declared a public holiday?
But if it's declared a holiday, the average farmer or fisherman doesn't care about holiday. No, if it's not Tuesday that traditionally they won't fish, or a day where they are not allowed to go to the farm, it doesn't make any difference to them. The average farmer or fisherman wants to go to that farm early in the morning, and I've been in the village, I've lived in the village, I started school in the village, so I know what I'm talking about. Early in the morning, go and get his firewood, get some, and come, and then get ready and go and vote. So we are not going to create any problem.
So we should stick to the 5 p.m.
Stick to the 7 to 5
p.m. Okay, so I need you to wrap up on this.
Establish election adjudication committees at the national and constituency levels at administrative dispute resolution mechanisms for first instance grievances against decisions and actions of election officials. Right now, as it stands now, whenever there's a dispute, the only resort is go to court. But some of the issues can be resolved. For example, if you recall Sene West, where there was an issue about a particular ballot box, and all that needed to be done was to just recount that particular ballot box. It was up and down and down. They had to go to court, and then the court ordered, go and recount. And they went to recount, and that was it. So we need an election adjudicating committee at the national level. For example, in this election, in my office, with Tony Lita and Marietta and all those people, we wrote a petition to the EC. The petition was sent to the EC. It was during that time. In fact, let me let people, Ghanaians, know that because of the issues and the complaints that we had met the Peace Council earlier. The Peace Council had arranged that we're going to have a meeting with the EC to look at the issues. It was based on that Madame J. Mensah told Rojo and co. that go inform your flag bearer that the Peace Council has intervened, and therefore there's going to be a meeting to look at all your issues. And they left, and then she announced the results. If we had this EAC, our issues would have been looked at. In various constituencies, issues would have been looked at. We look at it if they cannot be resolved before we go to court. But right now, when there's any dispute, the first resort is court, and we think that is not proper. Finally, and most importantly, the EC should be required to publish details of all election results on polling station by polling station and constituency by constituency.
I know that hasn't happened since 2016.
Yes. In fact,
maybe since
2004. If you recall, Rojo, Metonunu, and the late squadron leader, so
they went to court. It's true.
And the court ruled that it wasn't necessary. But I think that with the evolution...
Yeah, but I think formally since 2016, really, which is when we hoped with these expensive procurements of machines and all that in an effort to make things efficient, we haven't had that.
It enhances democracy and transparency. Let's know if there's nothing to hide. Let's everybody know the results are declared at the polling station. Put it on your website, and so we can all verify.
All right. Elvis Sefrie Ankra, Director of Elections for the NDC there. But we are still talking about the NDC. Away from that, you know, the NDC's 2020 flag bearer, John Mahama, had spent the last week or so on a thank you tour, primarily focused in the northern sector. He visited the Savannah region, the Upper East, Upper West, Northeast regions, where he talked about many things. He talked about electoral reform. He also talked about some of the issues during the 2020 elections. He talked about development issues, Agenda 111, and also projects that his government initiated, which are yet to be complete. Well, one of the issues he did mention was the creation of new regions, which he felt that we should have proper structures in place, and that the current administration did not do enough to put those structures in place. Well, the NPP's General Secretary, John Boadu, has been speaking to that issue. Let's hear him.
His comments on the creating of the 6 regions is embarrassing. He accused President Akufo-Addo of creating regions in name or in name only without development. He's so wrong on both counts. Facts are that the people in the affected regions, Western, Bron, Ahafo, Volta, and Northern, did petition the then fresh president, Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, after they failed to get the attention and the cooperation of the former president. The Mama and his NDC have no shame. After disrespecting and damning the EC and its leadership throughout the electioneering campaign, they had the gut to call on the EC to undertake electoral reforms, even after refusing to attend the opportune platform provided by the EC for all political parties to meet and undertake a review of the conduct of the 2020 elections. The MPP has said that we are not going to dignify their so-called proposals for electoral reforms by responding to them in the media. The media, as well as the international community, cannot be the right forum for such an exercise. We are a disciplined political party and respect rules. We do not play to the gallery. We are a serious political party, and so if the NDC is serious about their demands for electoral reforms, they should table it at the right forum.
And that was John Boadu, the General Secretary of the New Patriotic Party. Let me take some of your messages and then I'll come back to Mr. Ifria Ankra, who is still with us in studio. This one from Aziz Nwa says, the electoral reforms the NDC is proposing are accurate, reliable, functionally and timely because reforms enhance confidence in the election process. Madam Jean Mensa needs to do the needful. This one from Munkaila says, so there is no elderly person in the NDC to do the right thing. How can they propose electoral reforms in the media but not at IPAC? The entire NDC must appreciate the fact that the power is not won on the ground, but through serious campaign and well thought out strategy. So instead of the NDC wasting time preparing the minds of their supporters that by all means they are winning elections 2024, they should rather be telling us about their policy alternatives. And a final message from Kwame says, Jifa, please note that in terms of the presidential election, the whole country is one and only one constituency. And that is why since 1992, there's been only one collation center for the presidential elections at the EC headquarters. The 2020 addition of a regional collation center was to introduce 16 centers of inefficiency, opaqueness and corruption into our presidential election collation process, resulting in the massive failures we've seen. It's a pity that the NDC did not see through this manipulation far ahead. Thank you very much for your messages. You can send us some more before we wrap up on the program on 055-369-8789. So, Mr. Ifria Ankra, the NDC's 2020 flag bearer has been on a thank you tour. I know that this tour has delayed partly because of the COVID pandemic. And so he did take his time to go around quite a bit and talked about a number of issues. But first, a quick response to Mr. John Boadu's suggestion that the party and the flag bearer for 2020 have been disingenuous by seeking to suggest that the creation of these regions were not done based on a certain process and structure. Okay,
so first of all, it is important that as political leaders, when we speak, we must speak based on facts and do a little bit of research to help. Because if you go back to our 2016 manifesto, the NDC's 2016, it was clearly stated that if we had won power, we were going to split some regions. It was very clear. There's no issue about that. And that is why when the MPP started the process, we gave them our wholehearted support. That was the first time that for a major policy like that, you had the two political parties agreeing, because it was in our manifesto. So creation of regions, as John Boadu is saying that we did not respond to the people, is not true. It was in our manifesto. And if we had one power, we had that. But the most important point is that the issues that were raised by President Mahama are not issues that are coming out of his own imagination. First of all, when you go to those regions, you will see for yourself, okay?
The infrastructure deficit you are worried about.
Is very clear. And two, when he calls on the chiefs and the people, that is the feedback he gets. And as a responsible leader, a former president and immediate past flag bearer, he has every right to draw the attention of the government that, look, don't just create regions in names, but provide the needed infrastructure. I think it's a very legitimate call. You know, what I've seen is that the MPP on a daily basis, because of the things they thought they had gotten away with in 2020, they are becoming very arrogant and disrespectful to Ghanaians. They talk down on everybody. And you see, I keep telling them, we should learn lessons. You're not going to be in power forever. Power is transient. So when the people are saying that, look, you've created a region, even administrative offices we don't have. We don't have any infrastructure. Again, you have a situation where we left 123 schools, community day schools. We completed about almost 50. The rest, they are in the bushes rotten. When we go around...
The 50 figure you put out is not the figure that is known to us. We know that 20 or so were completed.
No, it's about 40.
The current administration has completed an additional 28 or so, coming to that 50.
Mm-hmm.
So you didn't complete 50 by the time you left office.
I think it was 40 something, because I don't have
the specific... Or they were at various stages of completion.
No. About 40 also had been completed, and then the rest of the 100 and out of the 123, if you take away the 40, 80 something, were at various stages of completion. When we go around, they show us. These are the schools you left behind. Some are 90% complete, 80% complete, 70%, 60, 50, 40% complete. They've been left for rodents. You look at hospitals. You go all over the country. Go to Sewa, a major hospital fashioned after 37 military hospitals, even bigger than that. About 60% complete.
The government has provided explanation that these hospitals under the Eurojet project program suffered funding challenges partly because of COVID, because obviously these monies are coming from abroad. It's only in recent times this year that we've seen some of the projects coming through.
Which of the projects? Which of them?
The WA hospital, we are told, is
only talk. We're going to do a comprehensive documentary, and we'll invite you, the media, tell you various projects in education, in health. Look at the Commander Sugar Factory, for instance.
But the Commander Sugar Factory wasn't even as active before you left office.
That has been 5 years. How can it? It wasn't an active. We were on the verge of they had started test production. 5 years. You've left it to rot. And there should be consequences for this kind of behavior. So, President Mahama's thought and the fact that he's bringing up the issues that are germane and of concern to the people is hitting the MPP. And that is why he will come out with such unresearched and unscientific diatribes. So I'm sure Ghanaians can judge for themselves. But we are speaking facts. And we have not finished the tour. And this is just
yes, I was just about to ask. So that's just phase one.
Oh, that's just phase one. He's going to go everywhere. He's going to go everywhere, to every single region. And it's been designed such that because of COVID, he cannot meet large numbers of people, but we use the media effectively, and he's able to speak to the people. And when we go out there and speak to the people, believe me, they are listening to us. The interesting thing is that many people, when you go around, everybody is denying that they voted for the MPP. Everybody is denying, we didn't vote for them. Well, some people voted for them. Some people also voted for us. They manipulated the elections, they used violence, but whatever it is.
But in terms of those figures, in terms of the...
The 4 more, we have only done 8 months. We have 3 years and 4 months to go. So we are all inside. But, 4 more.
Okay, so...
We haven't even done 1 year. You see how we are suffering?
Okay,
but we all day inside. So they should revise their notes.
Okay, but the point is, even for 2024, where there's a view that you political parties only live for elections, the view or the perception out there is that now we've seen both the NPP, we've seen the NDC as well. So for 2024, you both have to work hard to earn the votes of Ghanaians. It's not guaranteed that maybe the NDC will win. It's not guaranteed that the MPP will be re-elected.
The work I've done since I left university, apart from private, is elections. I understand elections very well.
How do you see the 2024 elections then?
2024 elections is ours to win.
Is it a make or break?
Well, it will depend on the structures and institutions that are put in place.
Okay, you say it's yours to win.
To win.
Why?
We will win the 2024 elections because, you see, if you look at the 2020 elections, and if you look at the stupendous amounts of money that were pumped into that election, I mean, in some constituencies in the north, for instance, they were spending as much as 1 million Ghana cedis per constituency. And then you look at the fact that, and in any case, we won the parliamentary elections, clearly. John Boedu, he said it. I have the video here.
I'm not sure about that.
Oh, yes, I have it.
I'm not sure about that.
I have it. Jifa, you can play it.
You can, please forward it to me, because I'm not sure he said that. I don't think a general secretary of the ruling party will say that the NDC won, the opposition
he said
won.
It's not.
I think the debate has been, considering how close, how near split the election at the parliamentary level was, and the concern about, changes, changes at the electoral figure, it leads to a questioning of the credibility of some of the results or some of the constituencies in contention. Unfortunately, those issues are still in court.
That is fine English. It's good. You are a journalist, you can speak your fine English. For us, the elections were stolen. When they realized that they were losing, they deployed thugs wearing military uniforms, some wearing beards with earrings, and they went and shot innocent people, and they stole the votes. Those are the facts. And the president of this republic has not been able to say anything about it. His blood is on his hands, and he's building a cathedral. He has blood on his hands.
But Mr. Efriye Ankra, there are court cases that are ongoing.
Yes.
If really you felt that the votes were stolen, the view is that even at the Supreme Court, you could not prove that.
No,
you
at
could
the
not
Supreme
show
Court,
that it was about the presidential.
But even we have those cases are in court.
Yes.
Number one. Number two, at the Supreme Court, the court did not allow us to ask the questions that needed to be answered.
But why
because
didn't
if we had asked those questions, you declared results. Produce the document. This one too is it rocket science. Produce the documentary evidence that formed the basis of you declaring results 6 times, unprecedented in this country.
The alternative view
you cannot give us legal strategy because, you see, let me tell you something. We have been to court with the MPP before. They brought pink sheets. Go and read the judgment of the court. So we're not daft. When you are going to court on a case, you do your research and you look at what the judges say on various issues, and then you build your case based on those precedents. So you look at when pink sheets were produced, what was the posture of the Supreme Court?
So if you are taking pink sheets, you are saying that would have gone against the party.
But I mean, and I'm sorry to say this, but I was in court almost every day. From the posture of the court and the fact that consistently on every single issue there was unanimity. Even if we had taken all the pink sheets in this world and hired Angel Gabriel as witness with Angel Michael as technical whatever it is, it would have still been unanimous. Unfortunately, that is my view. Because it appeared as if they had just made up their minds that they were not going to listen to us.
Okay, so you said the 2024 election is yours to win. What's going to be different? It was deemed that you had a good manifesto for
fantastic manifesto. It wasn't just a good
20.
manifesto. It was a fantastic manifesto. And so the texter who said that we should bring our alternatives, we've already brought our alternatives.
Is that or you look at that manifesto again and decide if it's going for 2024?
But you see, there's also a very erroneous perspective out there. And my friends, very, very dynamic, hardworking, fix the country people, some of them tend to make that comment. Oh, NDC and MPP are the same. It's not true. It's not true. The facts do not show. So Take sector by sector. Education sector. Compare the NDC's performance. We built universities, we built polytechnics, we built SHS, okay? As we speak today, the free SHS, which is the flagship program of the MPP, the teachers, now they are saying that the schools will be closed down because the students don't have food. Some of the students have been deboardinized. That is the major flagship, that is the major achievement of the MPP government.
Okay, so you talk about roads, you talk about health,
various
roads,
sectors, everything.
infrastructure.
Super.
So based on that,
evidence to show. Again, we were in this country when Dr. Bawumia and Nana Akufo-Addo, we are borrowing too much. We don't need to borrow. And the money is in this country. I worked at Bank of Ghana. All those videos are there. You come into office and you have borrowed, we borrow 53 billion. We have things to show. We have universities to show. We have polytechnics to show. We have schools to show. We have hospitals to show. We have roads to show. When they fall sick, they go to the UGMC, University of Ghana Medical Center. They go there. Okay? We have things to show, tangible. You have borrowed and borrowed and borrowed and borrowed. We've crossed 300 billion. 300 billion. You alone, you've borrowed about 250 billion. What do you have to show? When you ask them, they say free SHS. The free SHS alone.
Free SHS, 1D, 1F.
Where is that? Which one district what? One
planting
factory.
For food and jobs.
Planting for which food and jobs?
Year of roads.
What's a one village, one dam? Yeah. Dugouts. So this is, let me, you see, you like to speak fine English. These people are thieves.
No, please, we cannot make that accusation here because we don't have any proof of that.
Hold on.
We don't have any proof of that, so we can't call people thieves.
Okay.
We can't say that.
Stealers.
We can't say stealers.
So which one? You know the good English.
No, one? We can't make allegations against people without a proof.
Okay.
So, but anyway, we have to wrap up. Your final comments.
Corruption. Nanado, okay, appointed Martin Amidu as a special prosecutor. When he appointed, he said he has confidence in him. He knows that he's incorruptible. He can do very well. Okay? That special prosecutor, after a few years, comes back and said, I was completely deceived. The man I thought was against corruption is actually the mother serpent of corruption.
It's interesting
that I didn't say it though.
Yes, but it's interesting you use Martin Amidu's words against
the current
administration, knowing how the NDC ended up in a battle with him. But
yeah, we had battles with him. But Nanado and his MPP said he's a saint, he's super.
No, they didn't say that.
Okay, he's very competent, he's incorruptible, right? The man comes out and says the president is the mother serpent. You know what the mother serpent is?
That is his opinion. But anyway, that's where we have to end
corruption.
Thank you very much, Elvis Efrie.
Auditor General.
Always an interesting
Auditor General. You sacked him because he was exposing you.
And that's where we bring an end to the key points. And Elvis Efrie Ankra, once he gets into his element, you can't stop. But it's been great having him. Hope he comes again. Thank you all for joining us. My pleasure being with you today. Thank you for spending your Saturday with us. Thanks to the entire production team. Up next is Warm Up Plus. My name is Jifa Bampo.